topics. So please go through yesterday's session as well as the website has already been shared in the WhatsApp group. Yes, someone has raised the hand. Kavita, yes, tell me.
So for Docker, we need to install the Docker image, right? In which operating system we need to install?
So that we'll see in later sessions. Okay, that so we still have some time to learn about that. Okay, so doc,
Earlier,
tell me.
earlier when I tried to install, it took much space. Mine is Windows machine.
So ideally, these all are you can install in Windows or you can install in Linux. Okay, so ideally, in most of the projects, it is used in Linux.
Okay, but
Okay,
we
yeah,
are using Windows, so any solution will be there to install.
that is again concept. That is again part of your DevOps team. Okay, so they will be configuring it in the pipeline.
Okay,
Yeah. Any other
thank you.
queries from yesterday? Okay, so let us get started for today, guys. So let me start sharing my screen. I hope my screen should be visible to all of you. So these were some of the scenarios which we discussed, and then we brainstormed like the scenarios which will be covered as part of which all testing, right? Like on the day when the exam results will be published, or the Tatkal ticket booking, that is the emergency train ticket booking system in India, and if there is a festive sale for an e-commerce application. So these all will be covered in case of our performance testing. We can conduct performance testing to cover these kind of scenarios, right? Then the next one was like, will my infrastructure work in production? What about the data center operations in case of an earthquake? So these scenarios can be covered in with the help of site reliability testing or the operational acceptance testing. Can my application be hacked? Data security breach? Can it happen or not in my application? Testing related to malware and all. So how can this be verified? This can be verified with the respect to security testing. And then will my application be compatible with different browsers? Can my application be accessed by differently abled persons, right? So compatibility with different browsers, that will be covered as part of browser compatibility testing, and accessibility testing will cover the application to be accessed by differently abled persons. So all these types, guys, all these different testing types, right, they are non-functional testing. Understood? They all are belonging to non-functional category of testing. So this we discussed yesterday. The different types of non-functional testing are performance testing, site reliability testing or the operational acceptance testing, security testing, browser compatibility testing, and accessibility testing. Clear all of you? Any queries, anyone?
So ultimately, we will be doing only performance testing using JMeter, right?
As part of this training, we are only going to focus on performance system.
Okay, thank you.
Next, so we had covered till this much yesterday, right, guys? So let us go to the next topic. So why performance testing is required, right? Because already we are doing so much of testing. In functional testing, we are covering the functional scenarios, we are verifying the functional use cases. Then probably we are also doing automation testing, right? And there is like system testing, system integration testing. Okay, those are again part of functional. The development team is already doing the unit testing. So why again another testing, that is performance testing? Performance testing is very crucial, guys, very crucial. The Flipkart is an e-commerce application in India, right? So the first big billion day sale, all of you must have heard in the news, right? That it was means the servers crashed for Flipkart, right? And similarly, nowadays we have the OTT platforms, and whenever any soccer match or cricket match is live, the application goes for a toss, right? Nowadays they are improving the performance. So the point here is like so many people have access to internet nowadays, and hence the access to the web applications. For us, those might be applications. But for the application owners, they are businesses, right? They are businesses. So if my business is not bringing profits, then there is no use of doing that business, right? So for them, it is very important that they hold on to their customer base as well as increase their customer base. That is why performance testing has now gained importance in all the projects. As previously they were ignoring performance testing, but now they have seen the impact. If we do not do performance testing, we will lose customers. The customers will go to our competitors. Understood? So that is why it is very crucial, guys, to do performance testing. And why we do performance testing? We do performance testing to verify different factors of the application. First is the speed of the application. Now, what is speed of the application, guys? It's not that it is going to run, right? So basically, whenever we are using the application, whenever we are doing any user action on the application, whenever we are doing any navigation on the application, whenever we are conducting any user flow on the application, the application responds to our requests, right, guys? The application responds to our requests. What happens normally? We have the client means it can be our browser, right? Client. Then we have the server. Sorry, my bad. This is my client. Let's say this is my server. So whenever I will do any user app action on my browser, let's say browser is a client, so the request will go to the server.
Sorry to cut you off. Can you, is it possible to maximize your window?
No, my window is completely maximized. It
Okay,
is
I
in
don't know
full
why
screen.
I can see only like minimize screen. I'm not sure.
I think you need to check it from your side, probably, because my screen is completely maximized and it is in full screen mode.
Okay, okay, let me
Thank you.
check. Thank you.
Yeah. So the client will send the request to the server, and then the server will send back the response to the client, guys. Here, all of you. So when the server is sending the response, means it is processing this request. It is processing this request and sending back the response. So let's say I have launched an application. I'm able to see the home page of the application. Now different applications will load in different times. The faster it loads, the better is the user experience. If you have to keep on waiting for the application to load, nowadays the users are very impatient, right? The users on the internet are very impatient. If they don't like the speed at which the application is responding, they will simply stop using the application. And if a user stops using the application, then the application loses a customer, guys. Understood? So ultimately, it is going to impact the business of the application. So the speed at which the application is going to respond is very, very crucial for the performance of the application, for the user experience of the application. So in speed, we basically measure how fast the application is going to respond to our user actions. Understood, all of you? And normally, for speed, for verifying the speed, we do load testing. I'll come to that, what is load testing later. what do we do? Load testing. Okay. Then comes, guys, scalability. Okay, scalability. Who can tell me what is scalable? Not with respect to performance testing. What is scalable? Anyone?
We need to check whether our application is scalable to perform in stipulated load, or we are providing the more user load on the application.
Okay. So, guys, let's say
To
today,
increase or decrease the speed.
to increase or decrease the speed.
To check
Or in
the
simple words, we
application.
can say that when
Like
let's say we are using the performance testing using 10 users, then again after some time we are using increasing the number of user count, say let's say 50, 100, and we are checking the behavior of the system, means whether it is scalable or not.
Okay.
like how
Very good.
much,
Let me,
what is the response time of the application is nothing but scalability. We need to scale according to the
response
response
time.
time.
No, response time you will find in every test, right? Whenever I'm measuring the speed of the application, then also I'll find the response time. So the other answer which I got is more relatable. Okay. So now let me explain, guys.
Like a scalability is nothing but to check the application, like whether the application is handle expected load or not.
Yes, very good. So let's say an application ABC is currently being used by 1000 users. Okay, guys, an application is being used by 1000 users currently. Now tell me, any application owner would want the user base to increase, or they are happy with the constant user base throughout the years? Definitely they would want to increase the customer base, the user base, right? Then only there will be more footfall on their application, their business will grow, right, everyone? Now let's say today the application is catering to, or it is serving to 1000 customers. Tomorrow, or let's say 5 months, 6 months down the line, there are like 2000 customers. But whenever I develop the application, right, whenever I am developing the application as part of the project, let's say I have tested the application for 1000 users. I don't know how the application is going to behave or how the application is going to perform when 2000 users are going to use the application. And then let's say the application is not able to handle that load. It's just in a matter of 6 months, guys, of going live. Okay. So what is the problem now? Now my application is not able to handle 2000 users. And tomorrow, let's say after 6 months or again after 1 year, again my user base will increase. So very big problem. So whenever we are doing the performance testing of the application, we need to keep in mind about the future volumetry, guys, right? Because every 6 months, every 2 months, every 1 year, the projects are not going to spend lots of money just to handle performance. And in some domains, okay, particularly in utilities and all, you will find for 4 years, 5 years, they do not upgrade their IT. They do not upgrade their applications. So whenever you are doing the performance testing, you need to keep the future volumetric in mind. And when I'm saying about future volumetric, let's say my application is catering to X number of users today. I need to verify whether my application can also cater to 2x, 3x of the current volume. That is known as the scalability, guys. Whether my application can cater to the additional volumetric, it can scale up. It can scale up. That is where, nowadays the cloud services are there, right, from different vendors. The main factor which they boast of is that they are auto scalable. But if it is a physical infrastructure, the IT team or the support team have to increase the hardware resources, right, on the physical infrastructure to scale it up. Or there could be some, fixes on the application software side also. But the cloud vendors, right, they boast of auto scalability. So that is why we verify scalability also, guys. Verify scalability. So in case of scalability, to verify scalability, we do the different kinds of tests like stress testing or spike testing. Okay, we'll understand them in more details later. Next, let's say my application is having very good speed. Let's say my application is very, highly scalable, but it is over a short duration of time. It is not, so if I continuously use the application for longer durations, okay, after a long duration of usage, if I observe that no, the speed of my application is not up to the mark, the performance of the application is not up to the mark, the application is not scalable, then it is of no use, guys. It is of no use. So the next factor or next point which we verify as part of performance testing is reliability. My application should be reliable, right? Over longer durations of time. Okay. Whatever performance I'm getting, in the beginning, same performance should be there in the application throughout, guys. Okay. So the type of tests which we do to test reliability is basically the endurance testing, or we also call it as the soak testing. We'll discuss it later. What is that? But yes, these are the three main factors because of which we do performance testing, everyone. Speed, scalability, reliability. Any queries?
How can you confirm the scalability? Which type and kind of testing we perform here?
I told, right, stress testing, spike testing.
Okay, thank
Yeah. So any other queries, anyone? Now, because we are going to dive into performance testing, we need to be aware of some terminologies which are going to be commonly used, guys, in performance testing. Okay, we need to be aware of the terminologies which are going to be commonly used in performance testing. So let us go through those terms. Virtual user, virtual user. You will hear this term, in performance testing space very frequently. Now, why we call it virtual user, guys? We are going to do the test with different number of users, right? In performance testing, they may be in the in the volumes like 1,000, 2,000, 5,000, 10,000, etc. Now, I cannot deploy real users, real people, right? I cannot deploy real people to test like 5,000 people, 10,000 people. It's very, difficult. It is practically impossible to arrange such kind of a system to use real people to test the performance. And again, when you have so many people, it's really difficult to have this sync between them, to control them, right? That is why we take the help of different performance testing tools. And these tools help us in generating the users, the required number of users, the required volumetric with which we want to do the test. Now, these users which are generated by the tools, they are not real users, right? They are not real users. It appears as if the users are using the application, but these are virtual users. Okay, virtual users. So the performance testing tool is going to generate virtual users. Here, all of you. Next, response time. Very, very important, guys. Response time. Now, what is response time? Okay, I showed this figure, like the client will be there or any user, right, is using the application. So they will be accessing the application through the client. The server will get the request from the client. Here all of you. So this is, let's say, my request. Okay, and then the server will process that request, right? The server will process that request, and once it processes the request, it will send back the responses. It will send back the response. Then once this response is received, then your next request will go, then the response will come back. That pattern will be followed, guys, right? And so on. Now, when the server gets the request, the server will process that request, and the server will take some time to process the request, guys. Here, the server will take some time to process the request. That could be in nanoseconds, microseconds, milliseconds, or seconds. Nano is not really, possible. So micro or milli or seconds, right? The server will process these requests in some time. It will take some time to process that request. Now it takes some time to process, right? And then it is going to send the response. Now, guys, when information is transferred between client and server, how are they transferred? When information is transferred between client and server, how are they transferred?
through some protocols
In
or
the form of protocols.
Yeah, through the
REST services,
protocol.
REST
Sorry.
services, REST services.
Okay.
API
You
calls.
all are sorry.
API calls
Okay, you all are saying the medium, guys. Let's say you want to send
through browser.
a browser is your client. Browser is your client. You are sending information from the client to the server. Server is sending information to the client. How is this information transferred? It is transferred in the
Request.
form of data packets, right? It is transferred in the form of data packets, that is bytes, guys, right? 8 bits constitute 1 byte, right? So the data is transferred in the form of bytes. My point here is, whatever data is processed by the server, whatever request is processed by the server, and it will send the response, right? So response is some information provided by the server. Now, is that information going to reach the client at one go, at a single point of time, everyone? The response which I received from the
No,
server,
in the bits and pieces,
bits and pieces,
like
means it
raw
is in the form of,
information.
Sub
data
pack
packets,
packets.
right? It is in the form of packets or bytes, guys. All of you clear? The response, whatever the server will send, that will not be reaching the client at a single point of time, guys. It will be transferred in the form of bytes. So gradually, so whenever you see a page loading, if it is a heavy application, right? So it will take some time to load the entire page or render on your browser. Understood? That is why when the data is getting sent in the form of bytes, some bytes will reach faster, some bytes will take some time to reach, because it is transferred in the form of packets. So guys, there will be a time, right? There will be a time when the first byte will reach to the client from the server. The first byte, whatever the server processed, right? The information, whatever the server has to send, the first byte of that information will reach the client. We call that as time to first byte. We call that as time to first byte, guys. Now let's say this time to first byte is y. What is time to first byte? The time taken by the first byte of the response to reach from the server to the client. That is my time to first byte. Let's say the time taken is y. The unit can be milliseconds, seconds, microseconds, anything else. Okay. And let's say the server takes X amount of time to process the request. So what is the response time, you know? It is the summation of the time taken by the server to process the request and the time taken by the first byte to reach from the server to the client. So your response time is X plus Y. Is it clear, everyone? Your response time is X plus Y. Okay. Anyone, any queries? All of you understood this?
X plus Y means client taken the time to communicate to server, and Y is server taken time to
No, I never
send the
said that.
response.
I never said that. X is the time taken by the server to process the request. Once the request reaches the server, the time taken by the server to process the request is the X. Then it will start sending the response, right? So X plus Y is your response time. Then throughput. Okay. So guys, these requests are going from the client to the server, right? The requests are going from the client to the server, and it is not from one user. Any application which is getting used in production at any point of time, if it is a popular application, it's not that only a single user would be using the application, right? There would be so many users using the application in parallel. Understood? So requests would be coming from different users to the application, everyone, right? Requests would be coming from different users. So the server has to process multiple requests at any one point of time or not. The server has to process multiple requests at any point of time. So what is throughput, guys? The number of requests, okay? The number of requests processed by the server per unit time. The number of requests processed by the server per unit time is known as its throughput. Throughput is basically the output, how fast it is processing the requests, the output, okay, the rate of output basically. So the number of requests processed by the server per unit time, very very important, guys, and that unit of time could be second, could be minutes, could be hours. However, in general, we call it the unit time in seconds. So throughput is also known as transactions per second, TPS. Okay, throughput is also commonly known as TPS, guys. Very very important from performance testing point of view. Okay, next, request. So we already saw what is a request, right? Whenever the client performs any user action and that results in an interaction, right, with the server, so a request will go in the backend to the server. Any user action can result in single request or multiple requests, guys. Is there a query? Is there a query? If no, I'll request everyone to be on mute, please. Thank you. Request. So whenever any user action is performed by the client, it results in a request. So it can result in a single request or multiple requests, guys. Response. So whenever the server will process the request, it will send back the response. The response can be a valid response or a successful response, or it can also be an invalid response or erroneous response. So it will basically depend on the request, whatever is received by the server. If it is a valid request, you will get a valid response. If it is an invalid request, you will get an invalid response. Sometimes for a valid request also, you might get erroneous response size, and that is due to performance issues. Okay. Transaction, very important, guys. Transaction. So whenever I will provide a URL, let's say on the browser, I provide a URL on the browser and I hit enter, then what do I see? I will see some web page loading on my browser, right? So whenever I am entering the URL and or I'm providing the URL and hitting enter, guys, that is called a user action. I provide the URL and I hit enter, that is called as user action. And if my user action is resulting, okay, if my user action is resulting in an interaction with the server, if my user action leads to an interaction with the server, then it will be called as a transaction. If my user action does not result in an interaction with the server, then it will not be called as a transaction, guys. Okay. So any user action resulting in an interaction with the server will be called as a transaction. So for example, we have different user flows. Let's say I want to book a flight. I will launch my application. I will log in into the application. I'll provide my travel details and then search for flights. I will select a flight and then I will book a flight. Then I will probably view my booked flight or sign out from the application. So guys, whatever steps I did, like launching the application, so that will do an interaction with the server. I provide the credentials and then login, that will also result in an interaction with the server. So these all will be called as your transactions. Okay, these all will be called as your transactions. Transactions per second. So which I have already told you, right? Transactions per second is also your throughput. But throughput can be in transactions per minute, transactions per hour, transactions per second. So transactions per unit time is your throughput. So because very famous, most of the times we refer as transactions per second. So the number of transactions which will be processed by the server per second, okay? The number of transactions processed by the server per second is known as your transactions per second. Now, very important question, guys, to all of you. If my application is having very good performance, if my application is having very good performance, the number of requests are going to the server, right? So please tell me, for an ideally performing application, for a good performing application, what will be the relationship between the number of requests and the throughput? What will be the relationship between number of requests and the throughput?
Asynchronous communication.
Anyone else? What is the relationship between number of requests and throughput?
It's directly proportional.
Very
Like
good.
how
It is
many
directly.
It will be directly proportional. With increase in the number of requests, your throughput will also increase. With decrease in the number of requests, your throughput will also decrease. The condition which I told you is for an application which is having good performance guys. So during your test execution, if you see a deviation from this, right? During your test execution, if you see a deviation from this, then you will you should feel yourself lucky. Why guys?
that's a bottleneck.
That's a bottleneck because you have found performance issue. And when you find performance issue, then only you will get your bread and butter, right? Jokes apart. But yes, throughput and the number of requests are directly proportional to each other. Number of requests are also known as hits. So if we measure the number of requests per unit second, right, per second, they are also we can also call them as hits per second guys, hits per second. So ideally you will get a question in the interviews like what is the relationship between hits per second and throughput of the system if for an application to have good performance. So now next question guys, what is the relationship between, okay, what is the relationship between throughput and response time for an application having good performance? What is the relationship between throughput and response time?
So they work parallelly. So if your hits per second is
Inversely proportional. Yeah, if response times increases, throughput will decrease.
Very good. Remember guys, don't get confused. Throughput and response time are inversely proportional. So if your throughput is high, if your throughput is high means your application is having good performance. So if your throughput is high means it is taking less time to process the requests, right? That is why only it is having higher throughput. If it takes longer time to process the request, the throughput will not be high. It will not be able to process more number of requests at any particular point of time or within a given amount of time, right? So when your throughput increases, your response time decreases. If your throughput decreases, or basically if your response time increases, your throughput decreases, guys. So remember they are inversely proportional. Okay. So hits per second and TPS directly proportional, TPS and response time inversely proportional. Okay. Okay. Any queries, anyone in these terms till now? Okay. Let us go to the next one. Iteration. Iteration and iterations per second. So guys, now just few minutes before I told you about a user flow, about a book flight user flow. We are doing different transactions, right? Launch, login, search flight, select flight, book flight, logout. That is my one user flow, right? So one round of my user flow, one complete user flow is called as one iteration. When I'm doing one complete flow, guys, I start from launching the application till I do logout, right? Once. That will be called as my one iteration for any particular user flow. When you are conducting the user flow once, that is your one iteration. Now tell me guys, any user flow you take, okay, purchasing the application, purchasing the products on an e-commerce application, or booking flights, or booking hotels, or booking movie tickets. So tell me, how much time will it approximately take for a user to do one user flow? or one iteration?
5 to 10 seconds.
2 to 3 seconds.
Okay. So you are basically referring to those users who are very fast, right? So let's say 3 minutes in total. The user is slow. You must have gone to the banks, right, where very senior people are working. They would take more time, right, to do your transactions. So let's say it is on the higher side, guys. 3 minutes, for example. Okay, one iteration takes 3 minutes. Normally, we do our performance tests for 1 hour or 2 hours. So if my one iteration is taking only 3 minutes or 2 minutes, how am I going to extend my test till 2 hours, guys? Right? How am I going to extend my test for 1 hour or 2 hours? What happens, you know? We conduct multiple iterations. One iteration will be completed, then another iteration will be started. That iteration completes, another iteration starts. Did all of you understand this? What I'm trying to say? You have, let's say, 5 user flows. Okay, 5 user flows as part of your performance testing scope. Each user flow takes around 2 minutes, for example, and these user flows will run in parallel, right? So let me do one thing. Let us, consider as one user flow. We'll consider one user flow. Okay. So this user flow, let's say it takes 2 minutes to complete. Now, but I have to do the test for 2 hours. My user flow will complete in 2 minutes. How do I continue my test for 2 hours? Right? What happens is in performance testing, we are once first iteration is completed, okay, then another iteration will start. Then another iteration will start. Clear, all of you? In this way, your multiple iterations will occur. Multiple iterations will occur, guys. Okay, multiple iterations will occur. So the number of iterations happening per second is your iterations per second. Like the number of transactions per second, we have the iterations per second. Okay. Next, think time. This is very, very important, guys. Think time. Whenever a real user is using the application, okay, whenever a real user is using the application, so they are doing different transactions. So when the first transaction is completed, let's say launch application, as soon as the user launches the application without any pauses, does the user provide the login credentials and logs in? Once the user logs in into the application without any further pauses, it goes and searches for the flight. Without, after getting the search results, without wasting any time, does the user go and select the flight and so on, guys? Does it happen in that way? Or whenever you do any, whenever you use any web application, do you use in that fashion, everyone?
No.
All of you try to understand this. Do we do the transactions one after the another without wasting any time, without any pause in between? Do we do in that way? All of you? No, right? There is always some pause in between the transactions which we do as real users, right? That pause can be intentional or unintentional. That pause is not constant also, right? Whatever pause you take in between the transactions, that is not constant. Today you are doing that transaction, whatever pause you would have taken, that will not be the same the other day, right? So that is not constant. That can be intentional, that can be unintentional, but there is some pause in between the transactions. And performance testing is all about simulating real user behavior, guys. Performance testing is all about simulating real user. You need to simulate real user behavior. Then only you will get the actual performance metrics. So the time delay between two transactions. Okay, the time delay between two transactions is known as your think time, guys. Is known as your think time. Okay. Then pacing. I just told you that whenever we are doing any performance test executions, we will do multiple iterations. We'll do multiple iterations. So if we are introducing any time delay between the iterations, okay, if we are introducing any time delay between the iterations, we'll call it as pacing. So the time delay between the iterations is your pacing. The time delay between your transactions is your think time, guys. Okay, clear all of you? All of you clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Very important interview question, guys. They ask in the interviews what is the difference between think time and pacing. Okay, network latency. Network latency. So when you have different network bandwidth, like for example, we lived in the generation of 3G, in fact 2G also, right? We lived in the generation of 2G, then we saw 2.5G, then we saw 3G, then we saw 4G, now we are seeing 5G. So did you experience the same performance in all the network bandwidth size?
No. It's better.
Yes.
It's better now.
You observed same performance. My God. So
No variation.
you were experiencing 5G speed in the era of 2G also.
Yeah.
No, right? We are
No.
experiencing different performance, different speeds, right? So that is why the network bandwidth impacts the performance of the application, right? The network bandwidth impacts the performance of the application, guys. So the delay introduced due to your network is your network latency, right? The delay introduced due to your network is your network latency. Non-functional requirement. So we are going to do performance testing. Performance testing is a type of what testing? Performance testing is a type of non-functional testing, guys. And we also saw the other non-functional testing types. So for functional testing, you get functional requirements. For non-functional testing, you will get non-functional requirements. If you are only doing performance testing in your project, you could get the requirements related to performance testing only. However, if other types of non-functional testing are also getting conducted, then you might get the non-functional requirements having the requirements for different types of testing. So, and if your responsibility is for performance testing only, you need to figure out or filter out the performance testing requirements only from the NFRs. Clear all of you? Okay, you need to figure out that. Okay, so non-functional requirement examples. The response time of my application should be within 3 seconds or should be within 5 seconds. I should be able to achieve X number of TPS or X amount of TPS with Y number of users. Okay, so these will be different kinds of non-functional requirements or performance test requirements for you guys. My CPU utilization should remain below 50%. Okay, the percentage of errors allowed is like 3% or 5% or 1%. Okay, so you will have different non-functional requirements to test, And as part of performance testing, we verify the non-functional requirements. Okay, as part of performance testing, we verify the non-functional requirements. Clear, all of you? Then test script and scenario. So to verify the non-functional requirements, we will do performance testing. But how are we going to do performance testing, guys? We are going to develop test scripts. Okay, we are going to develop test scripts. We are not going to write test cases. We are going to develop test scripts. Okay, so you get the feel of a developer, guys, when you are doing performance testing, right? So we are going to create test scripts, and now we are going to execute those test scripts. So the manner in which we are going to execute, the profile which we are going to follow for our execution, there are different types of performance tests. So we'll see them later. So there are different types of performance tests which you can conduct during your execution. So you'll create an execution profile, guys. So that will be called as your test scenario. When I refer to test scenario, means in what pattern you are going to do the execution. But application scenario is your user flow. Okay. So test scenario is basically our execution profile. Here, all of you. Next, load generator. Load generator. What is load generator? So we are going to generate virtual users with the help of performance testing tool, right? We are going to generate virtual users with the help of performance testing tool. So those virtual users will be generated on a system. That system is known as the load generator, guys. Okay. So using the load generator machine, the performance testing tool will be generating the required number of users on that particular load generator machine. That is a system. Okay. So these are the common terminologies which we are going to use during performance testing. Okay. And in the future sessions, we'll get to know more about other terms, if any, but these are the common terms which you will face or hear in a performance testing engagement. Any queries, anyone? Any queries, anyone? Okay. So with this, we'll stop the session for today. Thank you all for joining.